Good morning or good evening, good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are in the world today. My name is John Danilowitz. I'm the president of Right to Freedom, and it's a great honor for me to be with you all today as we celebrate and remember the 2-year anniversary of the July Revolution. I'm very pleased to have two friends with me today, Dr. Badil Alam Mazumdar and Dr. Muhammad Nakibur Rahman, two friends who I've known for a number of years and who certainly were colleagues and comrades during the movement to restore democracy in Bangladesh, and two people whose opinions I value greatly. I know everyone's very busy these days, as there are lots of remembrances of the July Revolution that are taking place in Dhaka and around the world. So I know it's hard to get people together, and I appreciate particularly for those in the U.S. getting together on a Sunday morning. I want to start with a moment of silence as we remember those who are no longer with us, particularly those martyrs of the July Revolution, those who made the ultimate sacrifice to restore freedom for Bangladesh. So if you'll join me just for a moment of silence. Thank you. Hey, thank you very much for that. I also wanted to take a moment and remember somebody else who's not with us today, and that's my former colleague and friend, Ambassador William B. Milam, who we lost earlier this year after a brief illness. Bill was a great friend, a mentor, a colleague, one of the founders of Right to Freedom, along with our other colleague, Ambassador Fazal Ansari, who was is now an ambassador for the government of Bangladesh. Bill and Mushfiq came together with a small group of friends to form a Right to Freedom back at a time when the prospects of a return to freedom in Bangladesh were becoming ever distant goal. I thought that where we would start today, and what I'd like to start with Badil Nakib, is actually putting us back into that period. Just over 2 years ago. Many of us in recent days, as we've seen our social media timelines, and we've been reminded of what we were doing and saying. I've put ourselves back in the mood that we were in the summer of 2024, and I think it's been useful to see other commemorations. In fact, there was just a big one today in Dhaka. The July Revolutionary Alliance held a conclave. There was an event yesterday in New York. There are other commemorations going on. I've said publicly before, I was as surprised as anyone as the month of July unfolded and we saw the protests taking place and gathering steam in Bangladesh. And there was a tipping point that was reached. Now we can differ on what that point was sometime in July, but certainly, as we are today, we're August 2nd. I remember vividly, August 1st, August 2nd last year. I mean, to me at that point, it was over for Sheikh Hasina. I mean, she hadn't maybe realized it yet, had maybe not made the decision to step down, but it was clear to me the writing was on the wall that, her regime would not be able to survive further. So that was where I was. And again, we were full of hope and optimism at the time. We weren't quite sure what would happen next. But before we go on, I thought maybe, Badio, we can start with you. I'm not sure where you were last or August 2nd of 2024, but if you can just, take us through some reflections you have on, what was happening at the time, what your thoughts were, what your hopes were, anything you want to share about that time.
Thank you. I think it was a period of the July and August, obviously, a period of ticking time bomb. And I think Hasina was sitting on it, and in fact, we can use it powder keg. And our young friends, the students, were able to create a spark, and that caused the outburst and swept away everything. And Hasina had to flee. And I was very much part of it, and I was in constant contact and helping, mentoring, and supporting our young friends, and holding events. And also on second and third, in those period, I was also in touch with Professor Yunus, and the students requested. And I think that was at that time an obvious choice. And everybody thought that Professor Yunus would be the right person in that critical moment. And so I was in touch and trying to convince him. So this is and obviously telling our friends from embassies to other friends who are well wishers of Bangladesh, that it's not whether Hasina will be going, but the question is when she will be going. So the sooner she goes, the better it is for everyone, and this will prevent loss of life, and also really prevent all other bad things that could happen potentially. And so this is what I have been doing, very active in those days.
Great. Thanks, Badil. Naqib, do you want to share some reflections on, what you were thinking, feeling, going through in, August of 2024?
Thank you, John. Thank you, Badil, and I'd like to thank everyone who are listening. Again, greetings. So 2 years ago, right at this moment, I think the writing was on the wall that Sheikh Hasina will no longer be able to govern. I was in Washington, D.C. during those days. One of the biggest challenge for us during that time, if we remember that on August 1st, Sheikh Hasina uh, formally declared Jamaat Islami and Islami Chhatra Shibir as terrorist organization and outright banned them, and which had international ramification as well. So definitely people of Bangladesh outright rejected that. So the question was if there is overreaction coming from Jamaat, which might derail the movement. And at the same time, there were also issues because the way the designation came had impact in US and West, those of us who are living here. So we were tiptoeing it in a very fine line. This ordinance needed to be pushed back, but at the same time, we needed to ignore that because Sheikh Hasina didn't have any moral authority. So, and that's exactly what was done. Jamaat Islami at that time, if you remember, issued a public statement, and that's it. Because the focus was right then at that moment, step down Sheikh Hasina. From a 9 point demand, it became 1 point demand, and and this was a curveball thrown by Sheikh Hasina at that time to derail the movement, because as you know that unity was the key. The main issue, and I still think I often pinch my leg just to make sure I'm awake, I'm not dreaming, because July 2024 was actually a dream that came true. And the dream came true because of the resilience of the people of Bangladesh. I think the generation had enough. They had a question that they needed to answer. Did you remain silent that time? Did you surrender to fear, or did you stand for what was right? And the generation answered in July those questions with unity, no distraction, nothing could stop them. And July 1st, the ban on Jamaat was the ultimate distraction geared to derail the movement, because government thought that the propaganda machine that was present in the past 54 years, which dehumanized part of the political sector, including Jamaat and other political groups, they hoped that this destruction would divide the movement. So I think that was the final moment that no distraction is gonna make any difference. We are all focused on one point, that Sheikh Hasina must go. And the next few days prove that it doesn't matter what our difference is, we can settle our difference later on. But we are laser focused right now on one point, that Sheikh Hasina lost all moral authority. Awami League needs to go, and everyone was focused on that. But if I look back, you asked the tipping point. I think there were several tipping points, but the most egregious moment during the July movement was when Abu Said was shot point blank. Then Mir Mugdho was killed in Dhaka, and Wasim was killed in Chittagong. So those three killings were the tipping point that galvanized people from all across the sectors, regardless of what their background is. They came on the street. I remember one interview that particularly caught my attention. Uh, uh, a mother came and said that my son died, and that was my only son. So I don't care if I live or die. I will be with my other sons. So that was the sentiment when innocent people were killed and shot. And I think government kind of dig his own grave on the 19th of July when they uh, shut down the internet instead of containing the movement that actually was kind of like a wildfire that spread across. And July 1 and 2, August 1 and 2 was kind of the desperation and attempted diversion, which failed. So ultimately, on the 5th of August, just a few days later, Sheikh Hasina had to flee. And I honestly can't believe that. Interesting, just I'll stop with that. On August 5th, because of course the revolution, the victory happened in Bangladesh 12 hours before US time. We had a conference call scheduled with Senator Van Hollen, Dr. Ali Riaz, Ambassador Dan Madzena. You were not present, and few other people were present. So we actually went ahead with that conference call on August 5th, but by the time Sheikh Hasina has already fled. So that was a surreal moment for us in that conference call because we were planning to ask Senator Van Hollen to raise these issues, the atrocities. Of course, he was tweeting about that, but we were planning to ask him to raise this issue on the Senate floor. But instead of asking that, we were celebrating on that day.
Well, thanks for those recollections, Nakib. Now, I'm not an academic, unlike my two colleagues here. So I'm a former practitioner. So maybe I get some leeway in terms of precision of terms. But it was a very conscious decision for me and for us today to talk about the July Revolution. I know political scientists, historians still argue about whether what happened in July of 2024 was a revolution or not. And you're both, welcome to chime in on that. But for me, the reason I chose that term is because to me, it evokes the mood of that summer. And to me, what was glorious about that summer, and Nakib, you've referred to this in Badil as well, was the degree of unity that we saw. It was not based on class. It was not based on, political party. It was based on common goals and aspirations. So there was a revolutionary moment. Now, whether that revolution went forward or not, I think is an easier question to answer. And we'll get in a minute to talking about what transpired during the interim government period. But I think there's something to be said for recalling the mood of the summer of 2024 and the unity, not just among people within Bangladesh, but we saw among the Bangladesh diaspora. We saw among other friends of Bangladesh, people like myself, you mentioned Dan Mozina, foreign diplomats who had served in Bangladesh, the unanimity of governments around the world. At the end, Sheikh Hasina could count on maybe one friendly foreign government that continued to support her. And the other part of this, I think, was as much as those involved in the revolution made a lot of right decisions, despite this not being something that was pre-planned. It was a spontaneous, revolutionary uprising, which then, grew into this mass movement. But the collective leadership made a lot of good decisions. Whereas by contrast, the authoritarian, who increasingly was isolated both at home and abroad, made one mistake after another and made the situation worse. So there's lessons in this certainly, but again, just to talk about that moment and the unity. Badia, we'll give you and Nakib kind of the last word as we sum up this period, and then we'll go on to the interim government period. But any further reflections you want to have about the lessons of the summer of 2024 itself? I think you're muted still. Go ahead, Badil.
Mute, okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. Uh, well, um, I'm a former academic, and so I used to teach at Dhaka University and in the US in the 80s, and I went back to Bangladesh in 1991, and I became an activist. So I look at things from activist eyes, and with regard to the term that you used. Whether it's a revolution, I call it a revolution. And some authorities say that any uprising that succeeds is a revolution, and that brings an end to the old orders and creates room for the new orders. And so, in my view, since it was a successful uprising, and Hasina had to flee the country, and so it was a revolution. Whether or not it was the aspiration of the revolution has been fulfilled, whether it's an unfinished revolution, that's a different debate. But nevertheless, it's a revolution in my view. And in fact, about the end of the old orders and ushering in a new order. And people would argue that the constitution still is there, was not suspended. In my view, the constitution was kept for the sake of continuity, and so that least disruption take place, because many of the things that happened after the revolution were not in the constitution. Even the interim government was not in the constitution. The dissolution of the parliament was not in the constitution. In fact, according to the constitution, Hasina would have been would still be the prime minister. So that's my view. And but they have not formally suspended the constitution, but nevertheless is of an end of an old order and ushering in a new order. And with regard to I agree with Nakib that the most important moment in this whole uprising was Abu Said's spreading his arms and really the asking the police to shoot him if they want to, and that really uh, they awaken everybody, and someone who can easily embrace death and who can ask the perpetrators and the aggressors to shoot him for the cause that he stood for. And that really brought a lot of, and also one mother that Nakib said that my son is gone, but I'm with my other sons and daughters. And those are the important moments, and those are the most high point in our history. In addition to the obviously 1971, we must not in any way the look down or in any way not duly recognize the contributions of our valiant freedom fighters who selflessly gave lives and created Bangladesh. So yeah, that was a moment of unity, and everybody. Uh, the Irrespective of their views, irrespective of their political positions, and they all for one thing, for a change, for Hasina to go, and create a new future for all of us. So that was a very high point in our history, and I was very active in those days, and I took extreme risk in being very critical of the regime, and really proud of being part of it.
Great. Thanks, Badil. Nakib, any final reflections on summer of 2024 before we move on?
Yeah, just very quickly, I agree with everything Dr. Bodil said. And I also consider this as a revolution. When we remember July, we naturally remember their protest, the sacrifice, and those who paid the ultimate price. But if that is all we remember, we will misunderstood. We will misunderstand July. The revolution was never simply about replacing one government with another. It was about replacing political culture. For years, many people accepted change is impossible. They accepted some dangerous lie, and the lie was that ordinary citizens are powerless, authoritarian is permanent, and that lie was shattered in July. It reminded us that no government can permanently suppress people who are determined to reclaim their dignity. Young people who had never known genuine democratic competition suddenly became the guardians of democracy itself. Ordinary citizens demonstrated extraordinary courage. They reminded all of us that history is never written only by those who are in power. It is also written by those who are willing to sacrifice for principle. And that is the first lesson. The second lesson, of course, we can take is that never underestimate the moral power of ordinary people. July succeeded because Bangladesh stood together. And if we want to achieve something big, if we want to get out of the poverty cycle, the corruption cycle, one more time, we need to stand together. And that is probably the biggest takeaway that we can take from this revolution that took place 2 years ago.
Great. Thanks, Nakib. Now, for both of my my fellow panelists today, I've had the privilege and the honor of knowing them for a number of years and participating in a number of panels, including some organized by Right to Freedom. I've read your writings. I've been student of both of yours. So it's great to reconnect in this forum. I was thinking of some of my own writing and my own thinking in those days immediately after August, and I confess to maybe irrational exuberance and high expectations, which even at the time I probably could have told myself would not be fulfilled. But the position I started with on August 5th or August 6th of 2024 was that I'd seen this movie before. Not in person in 1971, but I certainly had read and heard enough about what happened after Bangladesh gained its independence in 1971 and the mistakes that were made in those first years that led to a period of political instability. I was present during the end of the Ershad government and the early 90s experiment with reestablishing and putting in place a democratic system. And then over the years, I saw those gains frittered away. I was present in 2007. I arrived in August, so several months after the 111 period. But I remember again the high hopes at that point and the belief and the hope after the elections that ended that caretaker government period that Bangladesh was finally on the road, only to see what had happened over the succeeding 15 years. So I think more than anything else, as I reflected on the situation in August of 2024, it was my hope that this time Bangladesh would get it right, that the people of Bangladesh would finally get the government and the democracy that they deserved. Now, in retrospect, maybe one mistake I made in terms of the advice I gave to the interim government, whether they listened to it or not is another issue. But certainly the advice I gave was not to worry about the day-to-day tasks of governance. And I know that's a challenge. And ultimately, any government that's in power has to be responsive to the people. And I think some of the challenges the interim government faced were because of challenges dealing with day-to-day governance. But my position then and now is that history is going to judge the interim government by what happens afterwards. So in some ways, you can't really, I still think it's too early to pass final judgment on whether Professor Yunus and his colleagues succeeded or not. I think we can certainly give an interim grade in terms of holding elections, holding to their promise, handing power to an elected government, even if there can be differences of opinion about the quality of the election. I think in general, there's a consensus that it was a good election, maybe as good as it could have been under the circumstances. And we now have, again, a functioning democratic parliamentary system with a government and an opposition which are finding their way. So that's a good thing. But clearly, not everything in Bangladesh has changed, and we'll come, a little bit later to the current situation and the challenges facing Bangladesh now and in the future. Um, but I'd be very interested, Badil and Nakib, on your perspectives of the interim government period. Not necessarily grading the interim government, but maybe in terms of at least a preliminary judgment on that period. how you see the overall picture in terms of the situation that Professor Yunus and his colleagues faced on August 8th when they took the oath of office up until the election period. And again, I know both of you were very active in different ways in, helping, to guide different parts of Bangladesh's political system through that period. But Badil, I'll go to you first as somebody who was on the ground and,
Yeah.
very much, involved in this on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. It's easy to indulge in what is called Monday morning quarterbacking. So it's easier to be critical. It's easier to make judgments after the events happen. And so that's the predicament we are in. I think as you said, that the day-to-day governance, the interim government made some mistakes, and there are limitations. And obviously, that was a challenge. And usually the political when a political party-backed government comes to power, they have they are the party behind them for not only support but also help. And interim government, everybody was for the interim government, but nobody really was with them in implementing, or maybe an exaggeration, or very few people were
I think you have been muted. We can't hear you.
So yeah, Badil, you've been muted. Sorry, Badil, we can't hear you right now. Okay. Maybe Nakib, maybe you can jump in and we'll send Badil a message to ask him to unmute.
Yeah, I can jump in. So of course, I'm a practicing academic, so I can't help but grade everything and uh, anything that I see. So if you ask me to grade,
and
oh, okay, let's go ahead and
and
listen to you.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And
Yeah, sorry, you're
but
back.
the most important thing. Oh, I was disconnected.
Yeah, just for the last couple minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody
No,
was
no, no.
on the
Yeah,
line.
go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah, no worries.
And okay, so what I said is that the is it's easier to do the Monday morning quarterbacking, and it's easier to do that. But I think we will have to be realistic, and they didn't come up with a blueprint, and they didn't know really what to do, and really didn't know the all the bad things that Hasina government had done. So it was a monumental challenge for them, and they did some good things. For example, economic situation they have been able to stabilize, and there was no bank run, and so financial situation was really stable, and the some of the things that people critical of is they are making the pact with the U.S. The agreement with the U.S. Right before they step down, and also all these kids dying of measles, and that is another thing that is I think people are critical of the government. But one of the most important things that the government did, I think, created a pathway or created a blueprint for the changes that for the new government to take to really implement the aspirations of the movement. And aspiration of the revolution, there are three aspirations. One, the election, a free and fair election, which has happened, and the justice to be done, and bringing all those perpetrators of killing and other bad things and looting and plundering to justice, and most importantly, the reform, some fundamental reforms, so that the Hasina's autocratic rule is not repeated again, is not brought back. And if you go the old way, you would not reach the new destination. So you'll need some fundamental changes in the way things are done, in the legal framework, in the institutional arrangements, and all these fundamental things. And through these 11 commissions, they have been able to create a blueprint. And through consensus commission, and in my view, I was part of that consensus commission. When I started, I had skepticism, I had doubts that with about 30 some parties, we'll be able to talk month after month, day after day, and come to a consensus on certain important issues. And obviously we didn't reach consensus on every issue, but the things that we agreed on, and political parties, all the political parties, excepting very few minor political parties, signed the agreement, signed the July Charter, saying that they will completely and fully implement those. What happened later, that's a different story. But that was also a high moment in our history, that all the political parties, major political the stakeholders came together, and we facilitated. We didn't impose anything, and they discussed, they debated, they argued, and then came to consensus on 84 issues. Of those, 48 relate to constitutional changes, and that's, I think, the that probably is the biggest contribution, and that the interim government made. Although some people are critical that the interim government could do it after they took over, and but that's easier said than done. And some people would say that they could take BNP's 31 points and try to implement it. And again, it's not easy, and it's easy to now think back and say that that was easy. But so this is, some people have differing opinion, but I think the biggest contribution is that creating a pathway for future change. And I emphasize the point that Nakib said, that the July Revolution succeeded, and obviously, if it did not succeed, many of us would be hanged. And succeeded, and because of the unity of all forces, and who didn't like the what Hasina was doing, and wanted change. And so, for the important changes to take place, and that kind of unity is needed. But unfortunately, that seems to be not happening, and that's a big regret, from my side. And but I still feel that the what the young people did, what the people of Bangladesh did, we all are very proud of. And at the same time, the pathway that for change that interim government created, and I think that's an important way forward. And I hope our politicians and all of us will try to galvanize together and try to make it happen. Although, unfortunately, this is the realization is that realization is not very optimistic. In fact, to quote, not verbatim, the Secretary General of the present government, the BNP Secretary General of BNP, and the most important cabinet member, Mirza Fakhrul Islam Alamgir, that things have not changed. Still, the corruption, still the bribing continues. Still, many other changes that people expected didn't happen, and that may be a wake-up call for us, and especially those who are in power. And it's their turn to really convene and bring together. And obviously, all of us will have to respond, do our part, and really cement that unity that is needed to really the bring home the realization, realize the aspiration of the July Revolution.
Great. Thanks, Buddy. And thanks for your perspective, both as an insider during the interim government, but also somebody who was very much in the trenches before and who remains engaged. So you were there before, you were there during, and you're there after. So I
Although
very much admire
although
that.
I was not part of the interim government, I was helping from outside, and
You
I
were
headed the
an outside insider.
I headed the Electoral Reform Commission
Right.
and a member of the Consensus Commission, and not as part of the government. Okay.
Sure. Fair enough. Fair enough. Nakib, your reflections on the uh, August 2024 till February 2026 period?
Yeah, thank you. It's really heart melting when somebody mentions Monday morning quarterback who's just not used to with American football. So thank you, Badil, for uh, making that analogy. And that's really true. That it's easy to judge when the game is over, and the hindsight is always 2020. As I was saying earlier, I'm a practicing academic, and I can't help but grade everything and anything I see. So if you ask me to grade Dr. Mohammed Yunus, I would give him A for effort, A for sincerity. But when it comes to execution, I probably would not be able to be that generous. There were a lot of issues when it came to execution, like what Dr. Bodil said. And one of the main reasons for that, if I may point out, number one is, of course, the leadership of the past 15 years. They left bag and baggage, but the reminiscence of that remained. The machinery that operated, the bureaucracy that empowered that government in terms of corruption and everything else remained intact. Only just one or two senior level individuals left. Probably few were removed, but the entire machinery remained as it is. Uh, and they did not fear Dr. Yunus' government because Dr. Mohammed Yunus, although had overwhelming public support, but lacked political support. And unfortunately, political parties were pursuing their own self interest, which was not always on the same page. And that put Dr. Yunus' government in a very difficult situation, almost like a rock and a hard place, because most of the agendas were not uh, unitedly uh, supported by all political parties. And that was a challenge. Uh, from the very beginning, BNP wanted election as soon as possible. And of course, that was one of the mandate, like Dr. Bodil said, that this government, Dr. Yunus's government, came with primarily three mandates. Number one was, of course, to hold a free and fair election. And BNP was primarily focused on that. And I don't blame them. They had their reasoning for that. And they thought that because, like I said, Dr. Yunus's government did not have the political power, bureaucrats were not afraid of them. And it's very difficult for them to execute all the good things that they were planning on their cabinet and all the decisions that they were making. So a political government would be the solution to that. And that was the main point of BNP, which I understand. I don't fully agree with that, but I understand where they're coming from. But that was not the only mandate of the interim government. The second mandate, like Dr. Bodil said, of the interim government was accountability. Those who perpetrated the heinous crime, killed 1,400 youth, and not only that, looted billions of dollars, siphoned that from out of the country, uh, almost depleted our banking system. All those other things, the extrajudicial killing, the Ainagor, and all those things, they need to be held accountable. And bringing them to justice is another mandate, and that was an important job of Dr. Yunus's government. And the third was, of course, that, like I said, the revolution will not be complete if the political culture is not changed, and you cannot change that just by change of people. You need to do a complete reform, for which 11 reform commissions were formed, and their recommendations were brought into the unanimous, the Unity Consensus Commission, which was also which was headed by Dr. Ali Riaz and Dr. Boudreaux was also part of that commission, consensus commission. So and so that reform needed to take place, and of course that needed time. But we cannot give Dr. Yunus unlimited time. There needs to be that needs to be done within that time frame. So I think among the political parties, if you look into NCP, they actually wanted the full reform before election, and BNP wanted election as soon as possible, and Jamaat was somewhere in between. So these conflicting self-interest of political party did not help the interim government at all. So we had some execution-related issues. And ultimately, I think if I have to look back in that 18 months of Dr. Yunus's government, I think the shining light would be the Consensus Commission. You had 30, probably give and take one or two parties, 30 parties who all have different political philosophy differences. They came together. They came together, and they were interacting with each other, debating with each other, fiercely debating with each other. But at the end of the day, they were seen to be mingling, handshaking,
Hmm.
hugging each other. I think that was a seismic change in the culture that Bangladesh was used to for last 54 years, where political opponents were subject to ridicule and torture. They wouldn't even have a cup of coffee or tea together. So from that, debating fiercely on issues that people are years apart, but still, when it was the debate was said and done, they were talking like their best friends. So that moment and day after day, night after night, over almost 6 months plus, I think that carried over to the democratic process, which is a very, very welcome thing. So again, I would conclude with saying that history will always remember interim government as a breach. It was never meant to be a destination. Uh, its responsibility was enormous. Dr. Yunus tried. Uh, I personally wish Dr. Yunus was a little bit more forceful to hold the referendum on a different date, earlier
Hmm.
date than the parliamentary election, because right now what we are seeing is basically a direct result of that. Had the referendum was completed sooner, we would probably see a different scenario. But again, I don't dwell on the past. What has been done is done. Now we have at least something. Hindsight, as I said, is always 2020. We could have done so much. I'm pretty sure Dr. Yunus tried its best, but the reality is different because of the machinery that still exists. I take one small victory at a time, one progress a day, and I think we are going forward. We are not going backward, even if it's a small forward. And I have to thank Dr. Mohammed Yunus's government for that.
Well, great, great. Thanks, Nakib. And we'll wrap up in a few minutes with talking a little bit more about the situation since the elections in February and where we see things going forward. I mentioned at the beginning my former colleague and mentor, Bill Milam, when he passed, and we recently remembered his life at an event in Washington. It was noted that Bill had not been able to visit Bangladesh for a number of years during Hasina's period because he wasn't given a visa. But fortunately, Bill and I were able to visit Bangladesh in March of 2025. And for me, I had the opportunity to visit two other times, once in the summer, just about a year ago, for the first international conference on the July Revolution at Dhaka University last July. And then I was able to visit just this past March after the election. So, I was able to get that firsthand experience on the ground of what was happening in Bangladesh. And I agree with much of what both Badil and Nakib have said. It was, one thing from my first visit in March of 2025 that I heard from an interim government advisor really stuck with me. It's that that the interim government was at the end of the day a weak coalition government. It had to balance not only its own interests but those of the political parties which made up that coalition. And again, I think Nakib, as you pointed out, those political parties understandably were at times working at cross purposes, focusing on their own interests rather than the interests of the whole. At the same time, again, I think as both Badil and Nakib pointed out, there were elements, remnants of the previous regime who were trying to frustrate the situation, both to divert attention from their own crimes as well as to set the conditions for their return. And we know that that opposition, whether inside Bangladesh or outside, is well resourced. They're active. We see evidence of that up until today. In fact, I just saw something this morning about an event that's being organized for August 5th, where the former prime minister and others in her government are planning to hold a virtual or a hybrid event based in New Delhi to talk about her alleged plans to return to Bangladesh. And, there was a massive disinformation and misinformation effort, again, led by elements of the former regime and their international supporters, which led the interim government to, frankly, waste a lot of time and effort just dispelling rumors and fact checking and um, dealing with this very intense international campaign. Now, again, I give the interim government and supporters credit for being successful in doing that, but it did divert attention and resources. And then finally, I guess for me to sum up the interim government, I'll end where I kind of started, and I might have written this, right after the change. I mean, Professor Yunus had, to me, three broad options. One, he could have just held elections. He could have seen himself as a traditional caretaker, organized elections in 90 days, and handed over to an elected government. That might have satisfied some, but it certainly wouldn't have fulfilled the three-pronged mandate which he inherited and which others have mentioned, including reform and accountability. The other option he had was similar to that of the 2007-8 caretaker government. He could have unilaterally pushed through a reform agenda. But then there would have been, I think, even maybe less of a chance that the elected government would feel any obligation to fulfill that. So if, Professor Yunus's reform agenda had aligned with the party that eventually came to power, then perhaps there would have been some continuity. But the odds were that there would have been divergence because, by its nature, a political party wants to maximize its power and authority. And much of the reform effort after July was focused on creating checks and balances and limiting the opportunity for another authoritarian government to come. So what Professor Yunus and his team chose, I think, was a reasonable then and reasonable now approach, which was to get as much done as possible on the reform agenda. I think the Consensus Commission and the Reform Commissions were a worthwhile effort that led to some meaningful results. Again, I had said earlier that I thought a referendum early in the interim government period would have been a good way to strengthen the hand of the interim government by giving the popular support to its actions, but the decision was made to delay that, which may have eventually weakened the government's hand. But still, I think there is some moral pressure, if not practical pressure, on the new government to fulfill that reform agenda. So that brings us up to, I think, the current day. We've alluded to this a little bit, but maybe we can just go in the next, 5 or 10 minutes that we have remaining. Maybe we can talk a little bit about, where we are now, starting with the election in February, taking us up to the present day in August. We've now had a few months of experience of multi-party democracy, a functioning parliament, government and opposition interacting on the floor of the parliament. We've seen other political expression. We've seen a new media environment come forward. We've seen continuation of the accountability effort with some, positive and I think negative developments, and we've seen a kind of international environment emerging. Again, Badil, I hope you're still with us. I see you're not on camera right now, but if you're still with us, any other comments you want to make on kind of the current situation post-election and maybe what we should be looking at going forward?
Okay. I'm still with you.
Okay, great.
The
Please.
yeah the one point I want to make about the interim government was that the expectation was so high, it was sky high, So it was impossible to achieve that. So we'll have to keep that in mind, keep that thing in our view, in our thinking when we grade the interim government, because it was impossible to achieve all those things. And people wanted change, wholesale change, and right away without any delay, and that was impossible. With regard to what is happening now, it's about 5, 6 months, and the one of the big disappointment is that the new government, which signed the July Charter and agreed to the referendum. And according to the referendum, they were to take the second vote, and their decision not to take that vote was a real big disappointment. And with regard to the other initiative they have taken, and already, as I said, that the Secretary General of the ruling party, the Major Fakhrul Islam Alamgir, and who is a highly respected politician, already said that the things have not changed, and that is a that is not a very encouraging comment, and because we want change. Otherwise, this will be an unfinished, this will be a revolution that has not really reflected in the reality after the political government came to power. And and I want to reiterate again that with Nakib, that as I say, right now to achieve the aspirations, the implement the aspirations of the revolution, we need a unified action, and the unity must be forced by the ruling party, because they need to play the catalytic role. They are in the trenches now. They are in power now. So they will have to be the one who will have to take the initiative to bring together everybody, all the stakeholders, so that the people aspirations, people hope are not dashed again. And we saw that in 1971, uh, the uh, the expectation that led to people's giving lives didn't really came to reality, and subsequent movements, 1970, for example, 1990 movement, dismissing of Veshad, really also created high expectation that really didn't make much change. And then this time, people expectations are dashed again, and this will be a big disappointment. Not only big disappointment, that will create the risk of the old system, the autocratic system, coming back, and that would be really a shame. That would be really a tragedy, rather, I would say. So I hope our politicians and everybody will come to realize that, and do the needful, so that we do not let the sacrifice of the people go in vain.
Great. Thank you, Badil. Nakib?
Definitely. I echo what Dr. Badiul Alam Mazumdar said. Of course, February election opened another chapter for us. Of course, some celebrated, some were disappointed, and that's how democracy works. You cannot please everybody. Election produces winners, and then, of course, at the same time, it produces obligations as well. The winning party, the ruling party, it's not like winning a jackpot that you take the money home. It brings a lot of obligation and responsibility. And democracy is not simply just merely counting the ballots. It is cultivation of trust, and that is more important. Again, in 180 days. In 6 months, it's the jury is still out there. It's not enough to be critical of a government. But morning actually shows how the day is gonna pan out quite a bit. I'm also gonna say the same thing. I'm pretty sure, and I want to give uh, Prime Minister Tariq Rahman the benefit of doubt. I believe that he has sincerity. However, on the first day when they did not take oath as the member of Constitutional Reform Committee, that was a slap in the face uh, of the July movement and the spirit of July, because BNP was campaigning for yes vote during the election campaign, which overwhelmingly won the majority, so with 69 point some percent, take some change. And I was looking before joining this event, has there been a situation where referendum was not executed by the government? And I have not seen one. So this is kind of scary that whether uh, BNP is deliberately uh, disregarding the July Charter. Some of them are saying in the parliament the right thing. They're saying that every word, every letter of July Charter will be executed. However, some of them are also giving conflicting commentary. They're saying that BNP simply said yes because they didn't have any other option. They were not for the July Charter. They simply just said yes, otherwise there wouldn't be any election. So that's a betrayal, and you don't. It's in democracy when you're asking people's approval, you don't deceive people by saying something that you don't mean. And if we have learned one thing, we have learned that democracy rarely disappears overnight. It's not that all of a sudden somebody comes out of their room and say democracy is dead. Dead. It erodes slowly. So that puts everybody on notice. It's not just the responsibility of the government. It is not just the responsibility of the opposition. It is the responsibility of everyone, civil society and ordinary citizen. We will not stop asking questions. And when government is fulfilling its promises or not fulfilling its promises, it should never close the door of criticism. We have seen some symptom of strong hands. That is unexpected. Let people express their voice. Even if you don't like it, it's not gonna shatter anything. So be little tolerant. For opposition, the responsibility is also not just to criticize the government, but give solution. And one very important thing that I need to point out, that we have already seen a cultural shift. In the parliament, we have seen what we have seen on the consensus commission, that there is fierce debate going on. But at the end of the debate, everybody comes and joins hands, mingles, laughs. So this is a political change that needs to be carried over. We need a good government. We need a good opposition. We need an independent civil society that will not only praise government, not only look for benefits from the government, but also will shed light where government can do more, will prevent government from doing things that is bad for everybody else. And also ordinary citizen, never stop expressing your voice. All of us, if we work together, we will be riding in the imperfect, bumpy ride of democracy, but we will reach our destination someday.
Great. Thank you, Nakib. And I want to again thank you and Badil for joining us this morning. This conversation proved to be what I hoped, a hopeful, optimistic, positive reflection on all that Bangladesh has been through over the last 2 years. And even though we were in three different places, it felt like we were together having a good Adha together. So thank you to both of you. And I'm sure this is the first of what will be many more such conversations. Before concluding, I do want to make one little public service announcement. I talked at the beginning about commemorations of July and August that are ongoing around the world. There'll be another one next Saturday, August 8th in Washington, D.C. There will be a live concert, panel discussion, and cultural performances. The event's being organized by a coalition of Bangladeshi American community organizations, including the Center for Society and Culture, July House, Washington, the Bangladesh American Network for Democracy, Save Bangladesh, the Bengal Council, and others. There'll be a number of guest appearances and musical performances. I guess John Kabir is headlining the performance, and his name I think means a lot more to those in the audience than it does to me. But I look forward to attending myself, and we'll provide additional information on our social media channels, and we'll put a link on YouTube and Facebook with the recording of this program. And then just finally, before we conclude, I just want to say a word or two about Right to Freedom. Again, Right to Freedom was formed by a group of Bangladeshi American and American democracy and human rights activists during a time where Bangladesh was taking a serious turn towards authoritarianism. And we spoke out and we provided a platform recognizing that many in Bangladesh had been denied their right to speak out. We continue to hold these same views, the importance of rights to freedom across the board, political, civil, democratic freedoms. The environment's different in Bangladesh. There are a lot more voices speaking out, and that's a good thing. And we'll continue to make our contribution here in Washington and around the world. We don't support any particular political party. We support principles, and that's what we'll continue to do. So I want to thank the board of directors and the supporters of Right to Freedom. I want to thank in particular Abdur Rahim Deepu, who's our executive director, who does all of the work behind the scenes. So with that, I'll bring this morning's conversation to a close. We'll make this recording available later. And again, thank you, Nakib and Badil, for joining me today. So with that, we'll sign off.